Welcome to The Point. Me and my massive bun would like to welcome you to this university-related program today. We're going to talk about all things related to higher education. Of course, we can't do that without addressing student loan debt, but then we're also going to give advice to college students, and we're going to ask the question, is college even worth it? Now, before we get to all of that, let's meet our awesome panelists. We can't do a higher education show without having John Idarola on the program. He's the host of TYT University here on the TYT network. We also have Lucas Lillyholm, who is a producer of the Young Turks on Current TV. And last but certainly not least is Ellen Richards, who is a college admissions expert and the founder of Ellen Richards College Admissions Consulting in Beverly Hills. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, let's get started with our first point that was sent to us by Scott Ross. He is the executive director of One Wisconsin Now. Take a look.
I'm Scott Ross from One Wisconsin Institute, and my point is, every second we add $3,000 to our trillion-dollar student loan debt crisis. Why? Well, because banks rig the system. They're stealing our futures and stifling our economy. Politicians cut funding for higher education, and universities raised tuition 600% since 1980. You know, student loan debt was the only consumer debt to increase during the Great Recession. It's now our second largest consumer debt, surpassed only by mortgage. We did original research here in Wisconsin about student loan debt, and here's what we found. We lose $200 million in new car sales every year because of student loan debt. If you have a student loan debt, you're twice as likely to rent instead of owning your own home. And maybe most troubling, if you have a 4-year degree here in the state of Wisconsin, it's taking you 19 years to pay off your student loan debt. To solve this national crisis, we must restore consumer protections. We must stop bank profiteering. And we must get policymakers to rethink how we finance higher education. We cannot afford to ignore the student loan debt crisis for 1 second longer. In the time we've spoken, students fell $225,000 deeper into debt.
Now, this is obviously a very important subject to cover when you're talking about higher education, and the reason why I really wanted to discuss it is because there was a time in this country where you could go to, let's say, a state school and get an education without taking out any loans. I was fortunate enough to do that. I was able to work and pay for my education and not have to worry about student loan debt after I graduated, and that also gave me the opportunity to get a master's degree and not have to worry about financing it or anything like that. But education is no longer the great equalizer in this country. It seems like you have to be tremendously wealthy in order to get higher education. And John, I want to start off with you. Why do you think that this problem is just getting worse as the years go on? Why is it that student loan debt has surpassed credit card debt in this country?
Well, I think that in that video he touches on a couple of good points. I don't necessarily agree with if he was ordering them in terms of importance or anything like that, but I think that the main problem, the number one problem, as it is in so many areas, even outside of higher education, is the influence of the government, basically. And I think that we've been having these fights between the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of funding of different social programs in different areas, and the Democrats keep giving ground. And the problem is that in some areas they're not willing to fight. And maybe they didn't think that the fact that we're not raising taxes, we're not getting enough government revenue, isn't going to affect areas like higher education, but it clearly has, and it's only becoming worse over the last 10 years. And we see as states have to take more and more of the burden of funding higher education themselves, they're clearly not able to do so. It might seem like they'd have the flexibility in different states around the country to do so, but when so many of the state legislatures are also controlled by Republicans who are unwilling to raise taxes in any way, it just becomes harder and harder to fund higher education. And it seems like, especially when a lot of the population is worried about the economy and things like that, they've already gone through college and they don't want to see their tax money go to funding college for other kids when their kids already might be through college. And I think that it's a problem that just compounds itself. And so I would lay most of the blame on government being unwilling to raise the taxes necessary to fund higher education itself when the states can't step in and do so.
Lucas, do you feel that this is kind of symbolic of our tax policies as well, because of the fact that, you know, we refuse to raise taxes on the wealthy? We continue giving corporations these huge corporate tax loopholes, and we always seem to belittle the importance of the middle class. And so I love that video because it pointed out how the car industry suffers. It pointed out how the housing market suffers because people who get, like, let's say a professional degree but have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt can't afford those things. They can't contribute back into the economy. So what are your thoughts on that, Lucas? Do you feel that our tax policy has a huge impact on the way tuition has increased in the country?
Yeah, in the sense that I think this is sort of another example of many things that we talk about on the show, on TYT, on The Point as well, where I think this is maybe more a symptom of of a larger problem we have, which is, I think, income inequality, and that a lot of times finance is basically used as a way to paper over these larger kind of structural issues that we have with the economy. And that basically, I think definitely a component of it is defunding public education and all, but also a huge component too, I think, is that working families' purchasing power has not kept up with basically the rising cost of basically everything, including education. Mm-hmm. So this is just another area where that's kind of being pushed off into basically debt. Debt is taking the place of rising wages. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. And I think with student loans, what's a difficult thing is that people are very easily approved for student loans. It's easy to write these loans. You think about any other loan that gets written, whether it's car, home loan, you have to provide a high level of documentation that gives evidence that you're going to be able to pay it back. Student loans seem very different in that way, right, where pretty much everyone can sign up for it. And I don't want to take away the opportunity from people. So I don't think it's necessarily people's fault. I think this is just the symptom of a much larger systemic problem.
So there is a big argument from Republicans stating that government loans are actually the heart of the problem here. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but they make the argument that, look, once you have the government step in and hand out all of these loans and these easy loans to students, well, then all of a sudden these universities are going to say, hey, it's free government money. Let us increase our tuition, and we don't really have to suffer the consequences of that. Ellen, have you heard that argument, and what are your thoughts on it?
I don't necessarily agree with that. In fact, from my research, I've learned that colleges and universities tend to increase the tuition along with the number of Pell Grants that students are receiving. And I think that really what this is doing is squeezing out the middle class, because obviously people who can afford to pay outright for an education, $50,000, $55,000, whatever it is now a year, they can do that. And the lower classes, it's getting worse as far as that goes, but over the past decade or so, they could get, at knee-blind colleges especially, a full ride to college. And I've worked with plenty of students who that's happened to. But for the families who are within the income bracket, where they are expected to pay the full amount of tuition, but that would actually put a burden on them, then those are the students who are really getting the short end of the stick, if that makes sense. And I also think that this crisis is somewhat due to the easy availability of applications to college. With the Common Application came the ability to apply to many schools, many more than people had in the past. They've increased greatly. So that then gets into a whole political issue with the colleges and how the colleges are perceived and their yield rates and those sorts of things. And then so the merit aid and the amount of money that they have to give to students gets allocated in different ways.
That's a really interesting point. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said, which I thought was really interesting when you were talking about how easy it is to get student loans. Like if you apply for them, you'll generally get them. Whereas with almost anything else, like if I go to buy a new Honda Civic or something, I have to prove that I have like a certain amount of income. And we know that too, the disparity between those two things is due to government. Because if I get that Honda Civic, I can go bankrupt and not have to pay it back conceivably. Right. It would be horrible for me to do so, of course, but I could. But you can't go bankrupt and get rid of your student loans because apparently the banks have much better lobbyists than Honda does. And so that also is the effect of government. And I think that you talked about the possibility that the responsibility is due to the easy availability of government money that makes it only natural and perhaps incentivizes colleges to raise tuition rates, which is true. But some people also blame students themselves, saying that, look, you're signing up for these loans. It's totally voluntary. Nobody's twisting your arm except for perhaps your family to go to college, which is totally true. But we have kids sign these promissory notes, and we have them take their 15-minute financial little. We teach them what a promissory note is and why it's important to read it, but they don't read it. And even if they did read it, they probably couldn't understand it, because you can get to 16, 17, 18 in this country, and you've been so infantilized by the primary and secondary education that you've had that you don't know anything about finances. I'm in my late extreme 20s. So far, I've gone into the 30s. And I don't understand anything about finances. And that's unfortunately the way that America is. Like when you were, back in like the 1700s, at my age, I could have already crossed the Atlantic and set myself up as a weaver or something and taken out a loan to buy my loom. But you can get to 18 in this country and you don't know the first thing about credit cards, let alone
That's
loans.
absolutely true, which is why, some college campuses have banned credit card companies from soliciting on the campus and trying to convince these, in some cases, teenagers from signing up for these new credit cards. But Ellen, this is a great question for you because you advise college students. I mean, do you get the sense that college students have any idea what they're doing when they take out loans? Do they know that they can't get rid of it during a bankruptcy? Have they received any education at all on it?
Absolutely not. And most of the time, parents are not even aware of their opportunities regarding financial aid or need-based loans at specific colleges, or even scholarships. The amount of scholarship money that's available every year that goes unused is absurd. And I think that a lot of students feel like, okay, I've made it through the college application process. I don't want to go through now a whole scholarship process where I have to write all kinds of essays or whatever it may take to get that money. But in reality, the students who do that can obtain a significant amount of money. But what I was going to also say in response to the point was that throughout high school, students are given various surveys to sort of for companies to ascertain where these students are financially and how much money they can afford, et cetera, et cetera. And so students are getting these solicitations for credit cards, things like that, when they get to college or even prior to that. And they think, okay, where did this company get my name? And so these companies are actually soliciting to the students that they think are most likely to sign up for these credit cards. And I think it goes back to the parents. And the parents, first of all, are filling out the financial aid paperwork for the student, so the student has no idea what's happening with their student loans. Then they think, okay, they don't have any experience, and their parents haven't taught them what it means to be in debt or pay off debt, and so they're taking out these credit cards to spend on whatever it is that they think that they need while they're in college. And I think that, yeah.
Well, what about like this emphasis of living on campus and living in the dorms? Obviously, that's an important experience to have, but a lot of times students are taking out loans just to do that, even if they're going to school near where they grew up.
Well, I think that's an interesting point. The idea of deferring, because a lot of these loans basically you don't have to start paying until you get out of school, and I think as far as this whole conversation. And it's a fantastic point if you're not allowing credit card companies to come onto campus to market to kids, but we're also at the same time allowing them to sign their names to huge debts that they'll never be able to discharge in bankruptcy and all. There's kind of a disconnect there, so I think we're kind of sending people who, as John was saying, who don't have much experience in this into a world that has some pretty serious downsides. But I think also the idea of putting off, the actual payment of these things makes the weight of it abstract, makes the implications of it. And I think in some ways, this is maybe more a systemic change that has to happen, but I think it would be useful to have, when you're in school, you have some kind of job where you are helping to pay for your schooling, so that you are at least aware, wow, this is taking X amount out of my paycheck each month, and it's just a tiny dent in what I'm actually owing, and I think that would give a sense of scale to what people are taking out, whereas it just feels like, and I've had conversations with people where it feels like, well, I already have $30,000 in debt, so what's like 1,000 more or something.
Yeah,
it
people
becomes this
definitely
big abstract
do have
concept.
that mentality. And I had a similar friend who got her BA and spent like $86,000 on it. Then she wanted to go get her master's degree, and she's like, well, one day I'm going to buy a house and it'll be around $400,000. What's another $100,000 to my debt? And it's like, that's a lot of
It's
freaking
another
debt.
$100,000.
And you're right, it's all about the mentality, and it's kind of American culture in some ways, right? Like, okay, just borrow now, pay later, defer, go into bankruptcy. But as we know, a lot of these students don't know that they can't get rid of this debt in bankruptcy. So what's the next step? How do we solve the problem? And I mean, education is obviously too expensive for people to afford. If you want higher education, you got to take out a loan in some cases. So how do you handle that? How do you find like the right balance? Ellen, I'll start with you.
Well, I was just going to first comment on what's been said already, that it's not actually just the government giving out these loans, that at a lot of colleges, especially colleges that don't give a lot of aid across the board, their banks will come to the campus at the beginning of the school year.
Yes.
And actually, like you were saying, I mean, it's easier to get these loans than it is to get a car or anything else, a secured loan. And they are giving out tens of thousands of dollars to individual students, just for signing their name. And they're so easy to get, and like you said, it's so far off in the future. They're not really considering the consequences of it, or what the interest rates that they're paying, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of curtailing the problem or the issue, I think obviously we need to allocate more funds towards education. That's a given. But we also need to change the way in which, the colleges need to change the way in which they're allocating their aid, because over the past few years, maybe the past decade, more and more colleges have been using enrollment managers who are a part of essentially the admissions committee, and their job is to determine how much it would take a student who otherwise could pay a full tuition rate, how much it would take to sway them from going to a different college. So if you have a student who can pay the full tuition, but they're deciding between two colleges, let's say Colgate and Cornell, and Colgate's figured, okay, for this particular student, over the course of time and the surveys that they've completed with the College Board and other similar companies who survey and then sell the lists and the information, they've determined through algorithms, okay, if we throw $5,000 at this person, they'll accept. So instead of giving $50,000 a year to a low-income student, they're now taking that and they're dividing that up and giving it and throwing it at students who can afford to pay the whole thing, but who will say, oh, well, I'll take that $5,000 and it will be a little less money that my parents have to pay, and I'll go to the school. And it's all about the yield rate. And so then they have the student that needed that money that maybe they'll give $15,000 a year to, and it's called admit deny. So they know that the student that gets that $15,000 is still really going to want to go to, say, Colgate, but then they have an additional $35,000 that they have to come up with the money for. So they're sort of playing this game with the numbers. It's really a business because they're trying to increase their standing, with the U.S. News and World Report and all of those rankings and everything.
So let's talk about the rankings for a second, because
Yeah.
that's definitely a huge pet peeve of mine. Obviously, we all want to go to a college that has a great name because we want to be fancy pantses and say, oh my God, look, I went to this big prestigious school. But if that big prestigious school is going to give you a degree that's going to put you in $150,000 in student loan debt, is it worth it? I mean, is it so bad to choose, let's say, a less prestigious school that's still going to give you a decent education, but it's not necessarily a name brand school? Like, do you feel that people are just kind of brainwashed with this name brand school thing?
Oh, I mean, I've had clients say to me, unless my child can go to the top school, I don't see the use of spending the money at a lower tier school. It's not worth it to us in the long run. So
That's
they can go
unbelievably
to
ignorant and
a
stupid.
Cal State school. Well, there are lots of people who will say that you have mountains of debt if necessary, but if you go to Harvard, it's worth it.
That's so unbelievably dumb. I can't even begin to tell you. I mean,
but I think that while there may be, it may be a cultural misconception or whatever, to a degree, the people that are hiring for jobs or something have that same sort of highly favorable impression of a name brand or something. So again, like I wouldn't argue this on the merits of the education necessarily, but I think that there is some degree of advantage of a name that people recognize.
So let me just jump in for a second.
Legitimate or not.
Let me jump in for a second. If your education is the only thing that you can fall on when you're applying for a job, then yes, the school you went to is extremely important. It also depends on what profession you choose. So if you want to be a lawyer, of course, if you're going to a lower tier school, people are going to pass you up for someone who went to a more prestigious school, right? But for journalism, for instance, okay, and I'm giving you this example because I know from personal experience. I had a decision to make when I graduated high school. Do I go to USC, which is considered much more prestigious than Cal State Northridge, or do I go to Cal State Northridge where I'm not going to have any student loan debt? In fact, they're going to pay me to go to their school, and I'm probably going to get a great job because I know I'm going to kick ass in interviews and I have a personality and I'm a smart person. You know what? And I know I'm tooting my own horn a little bit, but you know what? I passed up that USC opportunity, and I think at that time it was a risky thing to do, but I wouldn't change that for the world at this point, realizing how difficult it is to pay back those student loans.
Yeah.
When I graduated, I was making nothing. So I can't imagine having like $100,000 in student loan debt. And again, it depends on the profession you choose, so you've got to do your research.
Well, in general, it's a misnomer that the better the school, the higher the income. In some cases, that might be true if you are, say, for example, part of a fraternity, an Ivy League or something, where you just kind of have an open door. But in general, the American Sociological Association has actually done research on this and found that people are hired based on their quote-unquote fit, and so how well they fit into the company culture. So that may or may not have anything to do with where you went to college.
That's absolutely true.
And so that's something that people just don't consider. And then, like you said, I mean, you have a personality. You can talk well. You may have something in common with the interviewer at the who's interviewing you. So those things come into play much more than people give themselves credit for. And I think that what I always tell the students that I work with is that cream rises to the top. So that no matter what happens, if you work hard and you're determined, you're always going to be successful.
All right, we got to take a quick break. I'm sorry, we're definitely out of time. But when we come back, we're going to ask the question of whether or not it makes sense to go to college in the first place. So stick around.
Well, college is expensive. I mean, in the same period of time that inflation has gone up 300%, healthcare has gone up 700%, college costs have actually gone up 1,000%. It's this hidden inflation, this tax on America that no one discusses, and yet we all think there's a gun to our head that if you don't go to college, you have no other alternatives in life, and which is just not true. If I'm a parent, do I want my 18-year-old to go to college where, there's more and more evidence that kids are just not really learning that much in college? I'd rather have them have real life experience, learn the value of a dollar, learn how hard it is to work in the real world, and then in their 20s maybe, if they want to and if they can afford it, they can make the decision to go to college. But let's get them to have some real world experience first, where potentially, God forbid, they can also make some money.
Now that was a clip from James Altucher, and he was being interviewed by Ilona Minkovsky back when she was a host on Russia Today. And he brings up a really important question, a question that a lot of college students are asking themselves, or a lot of high school freshmen or seniors are asking themselves right now. Is it even worth it to go to college? Should we spend the tens of thousands of dollars? And Ellen, I want to start off with you. I mean, you advise these students on a regular basis. It's what you do for a career. And do you come across this question a lot, and what do you tell them?
To be honest, no. I rarely do. The one case that I can think of that was even an issue was a student that I had who was going to be recruited by the MLB, and should they go to this prestigious college or should they go into minor league baseball at the time? Other than that, I honestly have not really encountered it, and that could be the population that I'm serving. But I think that in general, people assume that you have to go to college. And I think that a lot of students go without really thinking through the reasons why they want to go. And so some it may be escapism, some it may be pressure from parents. Some students, especially depending on the school that they attend, they feel that there's no other alternative. I mean, to graduate and have all of the other graduating seniors be going to XYZ college and you're not going anywhere. I mean, that's completely, you feel completely alienated. And so there's a lot, it's not even a real pressure, it's just an expectation to go to college. And so if taking out loans and you know, borrowing is whatever they need to do that, then they will.
Lucas, are there other alternatives? I mean, we've been conditioned to think that college is the only way to go. Employers always or almost always look for a college education. So is it risky to totally bypass a college education?
I definitely think it's risky. I mean, there are other options like vocational schools and all. But I think, you know, I agree actually with one of the points that the guy in the video made, in that, you know, first of all, I think there's a cultural expectation, like you were saying, that you go to college, and definitely it depends on kind of what your economic status is and all. But you know, I think you definitely in the economy that we're kind of moving towards, it's a pretty risky choice to just not go at all. But that said, college to me also serves like a function of delaying what would otherwise be kind of natural things that you would do in your life, like getting married and having kids and all. In some ways, it's almost like college is like a very expensive babysitter for young adults. It keeps us from sort of settling down. And I think to his point, he's talking about sort of expanding your horizons, broadening your view of what's possible. And I think that's hugely important. But maybe college is not the best way to do that. And I certainly agree with him that it's probably better to get some life experience, you know, see what is out there, and then go to college.
I think that's a really risky idea, because a lot of people will graduate high school and then they'll start making some money, even if it's not great money, and it's going to be hard to go back to school and get an education. I know a lot of people that said, like, oh, maybe I'll take some community college classes, you know,
definitely.
dabble a little bit.
And I think that's the big challenge. At the same time, if you're spending, you know, your first 2 years at school paying, you know, $27,000 a year or something, and largely just partying, and I'm not saying that everyone does that, but certainly I can say from my own experience, I did a lot of that, especially my first year. You know, what is the real value of that also? I mean, that's an incredibly expensive kind of way to put off maybe, you know, things that are going to like limit your. Well, yeah, that's true. But are you paying that much attention in them? I don't know. You know, it's and again, I think because you're at the very beginning of the whole college process, again, your concept of how much this is going to cost me in the long term and everything is at like its lowest amount.
Yeah.
So
I think there are two things here. The bottom line for one aspect of it is that if you're going to go and be like a firecracker at Harvard, then you don't really need Harvard to be a firecracker. So Harvard's not really the catalyst to you doing that. So if you're going to be successful, you will be, regardless of whether or not you go to college.
Preach it.
But the other aspect of that is that if you go to college and you know you're kind of getting these life experiences, you're doing it in a bubble. And so there is something to be said for going out into the quote unquote real world and examining what it's like. And so many people who go back to school later in life or who go to grad school later in life will tell you that, you know, they're just such a different person when they go through that experience, and their outlook on the education is so much different. And a lot of times they're expected to pay for it on their own as well. But there's really a lot to be said for the life experience.
I remember my math teacher in high school told me that college is not necessarily about being an expert at something or learning a lot about one thing. It's more about learning how to learn, which was really, at that time, a little discouraging. I was like, I know how to learn. I don't need to pay money to go learn. But I think that if you know what your passion is when you go into college and you've really fully researched, you know, that that major, then you will absorb that information. Like I loved media, I loved journalism, so everything I learned in my journalism classes I absorbed. Everything else I totally forgot about. I'm going to be completely honest. So was that a waste of money? Sure, but there is something to be said about having that experience and meeting people within the colleges. I think that people belittle that a little too much.
Yeah.
You meet people that will communicate with you for the rest of your life, and they'll look out for you, and it's an important part of networking.
Well, and maybe it takes, freshman year, you go in with a certain major and you totally fail at it, and then you find what you'll eventually do. Like I went into college as a computer science major, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the electrical engineering I did after that, and then eventually I found political science. Now in college, I'm there for 4 years. I can fail a couple of times and I'll still end up finishing. But if I was like outside of the college environment and I was like, okay, I'll take some classes at a community college, and then I failed, I'm not in that structure or in that context, so maybe that would be the end of it for me, which would be really unfortunate. And I liked your point earlier when you were saying, if you're the firecracker at Harvard, you'll be the firecracker without Harvard, which I think is totally true, but I think that we should bear in mind that that's a very small percentage of the population.
Absolutely.
I see people.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I keep in contact on Facebook with some of my friends from high school who did not go to college. And at least going by their grammar, if not the things they say about their life, they could have done with a little bit of college.
Under the bus.
And so the problem is that it's very easy to lay out a dichotomy where, like, okay, I'm finishing I'm graduating from high school, and like I could go to college or I could start a business. How many people are ready to start a business at that age? They have no life skills, no life experience, and they're not ready, I don't think.
That's a fair point, but there are young people out there that do want to be entrepreneurs, and they do have the necessary skills to do it. So it is a tiny amount of people, but Peter Thiel, who is a business investor, has offered people under the age of 20 $100,000 over 2 years to develop a business idea, and he's willing to invest in it. And I like that. It's an alternative to college, but of course you have to have the skills and the entrepreneurial know-how to do it. Yeah.
Really fast. I bet if you scratched a lot of those kids who are not going to college and doing the Peter Thiel $100,000 thing, I bet there are some awesome prep schools and private high schools and those kids passed. That's all I'm saying.
What I was going to say about the college major is I actually advise students not to commit to any major in college. And I had a student who attended a prestigious college come back after the first semester, and he just said to me, Ellen, what's the point of college? And thinking, okay, shouldn't you have been asking this before? But I said, well, the assumption is, or the hope is, that you're going to be learning from people from diverse backgrounds. You're going to be hearing their experiences. You're going to be sharing your own experiences. You're going to learn how to become more articulate, and you're going to learn how to write in an articulate way. And actually, for me, I had a little bit different experience because every class I took, with the exception of maybe some science classes, I took something away from that I actually can apply to everyday life. So I think that critical thinking is really, you can't underestimate that. Mm-hmm. Now, the number of students who actually go to college and learn how to think critically, that's another question, that's another issue. But the students who actually successfully do that, I think it's invaluable.
That's a fair point.
And I think that's actually a really good point, and maybe like a better option than what I said earlier, as far as having maybe that first year of college be generally, unless you come in and you're, obviously very career track, there's one subject that you dynamite at, and that's what you're going to do, but have that first year be more of like an interdisciplinary kind of year, encouraging you to try some different things that you're interested in. Because I think definitely as you get further on in school, in the later years of just your first 4 years, that you're going to become more serious about what you're pursuing. So it may be better than just throwing people in, and then kind of like your experience, you may go a little ways in it and then realize, well, I'm not so sure. Maybe it's better to have like that first year or even 2 years where you can really kind of explore some different things, and then have that second kind of half of the 4-year experience be much more specialized.
But I've had a famous producer actually tell me regarding students who want to attend film school, say Tisch or USC or whatnot, that he would rather see these people go and get a bachelor's in liberal arts so that they can learn to think critically, so that they can bring something new to the table. and they can always go to graduate school for, you know,
Something
for
specialized.
cinema, media, whatever. And so they want to see people who can think outside the box. And sometimes, again, if college is doing, if the institutions are doing their jobs, if the students are doing their jobs, then they're learning how to think critically, and that works out in the end. But that, you know, just going and learning the skills that they could get on the job, he was not a proponent of that. So I thought that was interesting.
Come into it a little more well-rounded in your thinking.
Now, before we go to break, I thought it would be important to share with you guys what the numbers reveal. How much more money do people with a BA make as opposed to individuals who just got a high school diploma? And this is information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they state that by educational attainment, full-time workers at the age of 25 and over without a high school diploma had a median weekly earnings of $478. And then you compare that to someone who actually graduated high school, that's $447. I'm sorry, $647. But for those who actually finished college, it could be about $1,168 for those holding at least a bachelor's degree. So they do make more on average per week. So that's another thing to take into consideration. However, if you're taking out a lot of money in student loan debt, I mean, it kind of either evens out, or your debt can actually be more than what you're making. Like, you won't be able to pay, and you'll default on those loans, which will be a complete and utter nightmare. But anyway, let's take one more quick break, and when we come back, we're going to give college students some advice. Stick around. Hey everybody. So in this segment, we're going to talk about advice. Okay, we're going to give you guys advice if you're college students or if you're in high school and you're thinking about going to college. And the producer wants me to share a piece of advice that I would give. And I think the one thing that I would definitely tell high school students is, if you're an overachiever, if you think you have the ability to do it, go ahead and take a few classes at a community college during your free time. That's what I did before I went into college, and not only do you get units out of the way, you also save a lot more money when you actually do go to college. So that's a good thing to do. Also, when you're finally in college, the one thing that I regret is I didn't take advantage of all the travel abroad opportunities that I had. So especially in my case, where I didn't really have to pay much for college, I could have easily done a travel abroad program, and I didn't. So traveling is really important. You're gonna get a lot more experience going to another country as opposed to staying in one place in the United States and just getting a regular education. John. Oh
Yeah,
no,
so-
not you, Lucas.
Well, I would certainly second the study abroad. I did that, and it was definitely one of the best sort of
What?
experiences of my life.
Where did you go?
I went to South Africa.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so lived on a game reserve for about 3.5 months.
He was
so-
hunted, actually. It was
Yeah,
exciting.
It's a good time. Yeah, and it's amazing. You meet lots of great people, and it's a great cultural experience. I guess I would say, as far as when you're at the institution, at the school itself, definitely kind of exactly what John said. Really explore what you're interested in. Don't feel like just because you went for a particular major topic that you just need to start going in that. And definitely in those first few years, take classes you're interested in, because you're gonna do better and you're gonna pay more attention. You're just gonna care more if you're taking classes that you're interested in and that you care about.
All right, John, now I'll let you talk. Go
Oh,
ahead.
totally. Oh, by the way, I studied abroad in Egypt, so we're actually Africa buddies almost. But I would throw up here that if you do study abroad, bear in mind that they can be extremely expensive.
Yes.
Like, I almost doubled my student loan debt from that one semester in Egypt, and I didn't even get a job based off of it. So was it a good idea? I don't know, maybe. But I would say that I don't know that the incoming freshmen are going to listen to any advice that we have, but we should provide it. I think that people are too trusting in college. Make your partners get blood tests. Don't just trust them, especially if you don't know their last name yet.
I like that. We're finally getting to the real advice.
Yeah, because
ahead.
that's the gift that keeps on giving throughout your life and to your other partners from that point on.
Do you have personal experience with that? Is that why you're so? That's why you feel
If
so
they stay
passionate?
tuned for the post game, maybe we'll share that. But
Those friends.
yeah. So I will follow your point that followed my point, that you definitely want to find what you're passionate about. And that doesn't necessarily mean what major you want to do. Like, I know that I ended up on political science. That's where I landed. And I thought that I wanted to go to grad school. And so I got into a PhD program and I went there. And I was incredibly bored for years. And this is America where for a lot of people, it's first world problems we have to worry about, and boredom is a major one. And man, it sucks to be doing something and putting so much money and so much time into it and to not be passionate about it. And I know that people think, and we're taught to think in America, that money is the most important thing. And so just get a great job and you can have, you might hate your job, but then you'll have like a cool like grill at home or something and it'll be all great. But like you can be much happier with a lower amount of money, and we've covered the studies where they say that after about $70,000 a year, happiness doesn't really correlate with increased income anyway. So find something that will make you very happy and make you at least $70,000 a year.
Ellen?
I would say that prior to going to college, one of the best things that my parents ever did for me was to say, we will send you and support you in whatever college you get accepted at. So, but you have to figure it out. So you figure it out, you get the grades, you figure out how to apply the whole system, and once you do that, whatever, let the chips fall where they may. If you don't want to apply yourself in high school, that's up to you, it's your life. And so I think that gave me more perspective on the whole process, which is probably what led me to the career that I've chosen today. In fact, I know it has. So I think that parents need to be a little bit less involved in the students' choices when it comes to college, because I think that the pressure that they put on the students really kind of leads them down the wrong road a lot of times. I mean, this whole idea of like the tiger moms and things like that. For students who are actually going to college, one of my biggest concerns recently has been, and in fact, my junior year abroad was at Dartmouth College, which was the last Ivy to go co-ed, and I went to an all-women's college, so it was sort of a sociological undertaking. And so a little bit different from, going to a different continent, but nevertheless, not so much different actually, but nevertheless, I think that women or girls, when they go to college, they don't really know what they're in for, because I think men who are going to college have a few things on their mind that women aren't really aware of. And so I'm actually undertaking research right now regarding sexual assaults on campus and the increased number of sexual assaults. And I think that in general, we don't really teach girls how to really reflect on what's going on around them, and they go to college unprepared for the consequences of some of their actions.
So
And
can you be more specific?
I guess the best way that I can be more specific is to say that I think that we need to train our girls to be more like boys and our boys to be more like girls. So in other words, I think our girls need to be tougher. I think that the dads need to sit the girls down and say, look, this is what it's going to be like. This is how it is. I know, I'm a guy, I've been through it, and these are the signs you have to look out for. And so you need to survive. You need to be a survivor. You need to be strong. You need to look out for yourself. And I think that many females in particular go to college with this sort of dream in mind that it's going to be great. Many even think that they're going to meet their husband in college and things like that, and it's just not going to happen. And at the same time, I mean, it's the same thing for males. I mean, they might pledge a fraternity and get themselves into hazing situations that have been the episodes have been escalating just regarding hazing and deaths and just the negative things associated with those. And I think that if we raise our children to think outside the box and not feel like they have to be part of the status quo or part of what everybody else is doing or part of the group, so to speak, then I think that they'll get a lot more out of college, but also it's better for their health and well-being in general.
Yeah, I think the
long-term.
same is true of women who enter the workforce. You got to learn how to be as aggressive as a man, negotiate like a man. I think a lot of times when we talk about, the income disparity between men and women, we don't take into account that a lot of times men are better at negotiating their salaries than women are, because women are a little more timid about it. So, and I know that's a completely different topic, but
Right.
What you're saying totally reminded me of that, and I think that it's an excellent point. But let's talk about like the social aspect of college a little bit, because of course that was all really great academic advice. But what kind of advice would you give college students when it comes to the social atmosphere? I'll start with you, John. He's an expert at this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. That's the only thing I got out of college. Almost a PhD, but just the social stuff. No, here's some practical advice. Especially, it really only works if you're in a dorm. But a lot of people will go into dorms at least for the first or second year of college. Understand that you will feel awkward and out of place and like, I want to be cool, but I don't feel cool yet. It's like at a dance. When everybody goes to singles dance or whatever, nobody feels cool, but they all want to. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to grab a volleyball, and you're going to go through the dorm, and you're going to knock on every door and say, I'm getting people together from the dorm to go play volleyball. Because everybody in those rooms wants to be invited into a group, and so you're going to be the person to do it. And that happened to me my first day at college, and I have friends now from that first day. And so you can collect 10, 20, 30 friends that you'll whittle down to an actual group of the useful ones based on that day alone. But I would say that to be very careful of the people that you affiliate with in college, because friends can make your college experience much better, but they can also make it much worse. Friends want to know you and get to know you, but they don't always have the best, your best interest in mind, I would say. Friends can want the version of you that they know, and any change, we talked about this in the main show, any change you try to make, even if it's getting involved in a new club or changing your major, or working on a project, or getting a new job, a lot of friends will try to stop you from changing too much. And you don't want those types of friends in college. You want the ones who are going to say, you want to join student government? Let's join student government together this year. And then next year we're going to do fencing or something. Like ones that'll make you get out there and be a better version of yourself. And there are both kinds in college. You have to be very careful which ones you choose.
Or that social group may make you internally stop yourself from doing some of those other things without them even saying. I would sort of to continue off of that. I think definitely, sort of again, following the things that you're interested in and all, look into clubs and groups on campus and all that are related to things that you're interested in. Because I felt this way in college a lot. I didn't have a lot of friends that were interested in politics and everything, and I really wished that I did. But then, if your whole social group not really interested in it, it makes it harder to kind of pursue those things, and it just makes you kind of let that continually fall by the wayside. So find the things you're passionate about, and then find other people that are equally passionate about them too, because then I think you wind up with some really good kind of reinforcing traits. And the one thing that sort of makes it stand out in my mind is I remember seeing this picture of Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn, and Daniel Ellsberg all hanging out together. They got to be in like their mid-20s, yeah.
How much would
on
you
a
want to be
college
part
campus.
of that group?
Oh,
Like I'm thinking about like Lucas like losing
well, I'd
it.
kill for it. But it was also, it felt, and I'm not sure exactly how they all got there together, but it was the idea of like, these guys all together are only going to serve to reinforce each other's kind of best attributes and qualities. Mm-hmm. And to John's point, and I know this from personal experience, if you wind up making a lot of friends that all like smoking pot, you're all going to smoke a lot of pot together, and that's it. So so definitely it's the people you surround yourself with absolutely create a system of incentives for you, I think.
All right. Well, go ahead, Ellen. I'll let you have the last word.
I was just going to say that at the same time in high school, I think that we're influenced very easily by our friends, and I agree with everything that's been said about groups of friends and friends influencing each other. But I think that actually college can be a great time to stand back and observe. And that sort of goes hand in hand with critical thinking, but observing the way that people interact and observing, becoming more aware of people's, agendas in terms of what they want you to do and how they want you to fit into the mold that they set for you, and just sort of get that antenna up and going, and so that you can be on the lookout for that in the future.
All right, I'm loving the advice. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. This was a great conversation. John Idarola, I'm sure everyone in our network is very aware of who you are, but for those who don't know, where can they see more of your work?
You can go to youtube.com/TOIT University for both serious and fun stories about college every day of the week.
All right, Lucas Lilyhope?
Well, I'm mostly behind the scenes, so just watch TYT stuff, please.
Well, you do have a Twitter account. What's going on with that?
Oh, that's true. Well, yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I occasionally tweet out mostly stories and sometimes pithy comments. So if you like, please follow me.
Excellent. And Ellen Richards, thank you for joining us. Where can
Thank
our
you.
audience learn more about you?
My webpage, ellenrichards.com, that will keep you sort of updated on what's going on with me and my research, and also my Twitter has a lot of great information about the ever-changing trends in college admissions.
All right, sounds great. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the show. Also, a special thanks to our Point contributor, Scott Ross. You can find out more about his group, One Wisconsin Now, and what they're doing to combat student loan debt. It's at onewisconsinnow.org. I'm Anna Kasparian. Thank you so much for watching the show. You guys can check me out at the Young Turks Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific time on youtube.com/TYT Live. We'll see you next week.